Being a self-directed language learner since the internet was a thing, I've gotten a lot of advice. It's been a lot of good advice and a lot of bad advice, but I had to figure out the difference for myself. And I did this with lots and lots of trial and error. So in this video, I'm going to save you some time and rank some of the worst language learning advice I've ever gotten and explain to you why it's so bad to begin with. Oh, and I'm saving the best for last, so stick around. The first piece of bad language learning advice that I've heard for years is that you have to study every single day. Now, a lot of people don't say this outright, it's more implied. I'm sure you've probably seen videos where people talking about their insane language learning routines and their habits and how quickly they got fluent. That combined with our insane hustle culture leads us to have this idea, even if nobody really said it outright, that you need to be studying every single day or else it's not worth it and you need to give up. Now, every single day is absolutely not necessary. Is it helpful? It can be if it's not directly hurting you, but if it's directly hurting you, then it's doing the opposite. What I would suggest instead is to learn a language consistently. And this is an important difference because consistently doesn't necessarily mean anything in particular. It just means like regularly. Like you come back to it regularly. And that can mean every day, or it can mean every other day, it can mean a few times a week. But the actual rate of consistency for your language learning is going to depend completely on you and your lifestyle, your goals, things like that. While some language learners do absolutely thrive with listening to podcasts all the time, listening to music, just constantly getting comprehensible input, I'm the opposite. I'll get overwhelmed if I try and learn a language every day. So instead, my advice is to find a consistency that is functional for you and leaves you some joy in language learning. Because when you start stressing out about how consistently or how every day you're learning a language, you lose the plot of language learning and you get so focused on being perfect and being a consistent little language learning robot that you forget to actually learn the language. The next bad piece of language learning advice is to prioritize your language learning over everything else. This definitely comes from an all or nothing mindset that is very common with language learners, but generally we get so motivated to learn a language that we decide that we're going to do it the most efficient, the most motivated, the quickest way possible, and that means foregoing all hobbies, all interests, all saneness in our day to be the best little language learner that we can be. But for most of us, language learning is a hobby. Language learning is something that we want to do, and it's a way to challenge ourselves and learn about different parts of life. This doesn't replace playing tennis on the weekends or hanging out with your friends at the movies. Language learning is something that you do on the side of those things. In fact, this is really how you stay consistent in your language learning, because if you forego all of the other really great parts of your life in order to be successful in learning a language, it's gonna hurt your language learning because getting rid of all that happiness and all the other things that fill your bucket and like make your life better, you're gonna be too stressed out and tired to learn a language. So don't prioritize language learning over everything else. In fact, if language learning is your last priority and it means it just doesn't get done sometimes, that's totally cool too. There's no rules for any of this stuff. The next worst piece of language learning advice is if you can't stay motivated, you're not disciplined enough. Now this is a big one for me. This frustrates me a lot because motivation and discipline are like two separate things. So motivation is an emotion. Okay, emotions ebb and flow with time in response to different life events. Also, it's an emotion. And emotions are not fact. They're not science. So you can't rely on them to be a certain way at a certain time. And this is when a lot of very straight and narrow people will say, oh yeah, well that's why you go with discipline, because discipline means you do the thing and you don't question it, you don't think about it, and you just do it. You just wake up at 4 in the morning and you just do it without any thought. Now, if you want to be that militant with your language learning, that is your prerogative, but in my experience, that is not functional. In fact, motivation is about letting your brain and your body do whatever it wants to do and not forcing it to learn a certain way or learn a certain thing or do a certain thing. So if you need a break today, if you just don't have the energy, this doesn't mean that you lack discipline, it just means you need a break. And it's not that deep. Everybody who says that in order to learn a language you need discipline, they're just trying to sell you something. Next bad piece of language learning advice is that if you want to get conversational, you have to speak to native speakers. Now there's some nuance here. Okay, so yes, ideally, once you get to a certain point, you'll be speaking to native speakers all the time. But when you are first starting out learning a language, when you are first a beginner, that can be really, really overwhelming and scary. If that's the case, if that's like a whole lot of stress for you to take on, you don't need to jump right into speaking with native speakers. You can practice speaking using other methods, and it's still just as valid. In fact, it's more valid because it's supporting your language learning the way that your language learning needs supported. So if you are just now starting out with a language and the idea of jumping into a conversation with the native speaker is overwhelming, there are steps you can take. You can talk to yourself, you can talk to a chatbot, you can just record yourself talking. There are so many steps that you can put in between you and that native speaker conversation that can help you to build your confidence, build your skills, build your experience, because one day you will speak to native speakers. Just because you're using a chatbot or you're just talking to yourself right now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be completely dependent upon lower stress activities. It means you're chopping up these goals little by little, and that's what you do to be a successful language learner. The next piece of advice that is just straight up wrong is that moving abroad is the best way to learn a language because you'll be forced to learn it. Now, I say this as somebody who did move abroad, and one of the reasons why I moved abroad was to learn a language. So I can tell you for a fact that it's not that cut and dry. It's not that simple. I mean, first of all, many of us don't have the privilege of moving abroad. That's just not a thing that a lot of people can do. Even if you are in the position of privilege where you're able to move abroad, moving abroad itself is not inherent to being immersed in the culture. Especially if you're an American or if you're a native English speaker in general, it is way too easy to find other native English speakers, or the native speakers of the country that you're visiting likely already speak some English, so it's easier for them to try and talk English to you than it is for you to try and talk their language to them. And this is an unfortunate thing that happens a lot for sure, where a native English speaker is trying to learn the target language and everybody else notices that you're struggling with the target language, so they switch to English, and that can be really annoying. And it's just one of the factors that makes this kind of not really true, that just because you move abroad does not mean you're forced to learn the language. This is especially true for those who travel abroad for work. If you're too busy working that you can't go out and meet new people, which is a thing that absolutely happens, there's zero opportunity for you to learn language. It's just not a thing that can happen. And you physically being in a new country will make it easier, yes, but it does not make it inevitable. And if you are living abroad to learn a language, it does still require a lot of effort. So keep that in mind. Because the first 6 months that I lived abroad, I thought that I was gonna learn Spanish by osmosis, I guess. I don't know. The next bad piece of language learning advice is you're not fluent until ... Basically, anything that has to do with the word fluency. Because like most trigger words in language learning, fluency does not really mean anything by itself. And this is what messes a lot of people up, because people are looking for certainty in their language learning, but most of the words involved in language learning do not carry certainty at all. Fluency is one of them. So fluency, we generally use fluency to describe our like ultimate goal in learning a language. I want to be fluent. I want to be able to talk to people. I want to be able to like get a job. Whatever your goal is, people like to attribute the word fluency to their goal. Problem is, because fluency is attributed to all sorts of goals and all sorts of intentions and all sorts of mindsets, there's no way to really strictly define what fluency actually is. Fluency is literally just being fluent, which means to speak fluidly. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't take into account any particular situations, if you're talking to somebody with a different accent, or if you're using certain jargon at work, things like that. So when people say you're not fluent until you can have a conversation without translating in your head, or you're not fluent until you can use the past tense, or you're not fluent until you can just talk without thinking about it. These are all completely made up definitions of the word fluency, and this is exactly why I avoid using the word fluent at all costs. I try to be really intentional about my language, and fluent is not intentional language at all. It's just a random word that feels good to say, to be honest. It doesn't actually mean anything strict. People may use the word fluent and it means something different to every individual person. And so next time you're listening to somebody tell you about how they got fluent, keep that in mind. what do they mean by fluent, and is it the same definition that you have for fluent? Because that will really change the trajectory of your language learning by stopping you from following advice that isn't really meant for you. Now, the last piece of language learning advice I have for you that sucks, and I saved the best for last, remember, is to use random app strategy, whatever, to learn a language. Now, there's two main reasons why this is bad language learning advice. The first reason is because nobody can tell you what app or strategy is going to work for you personally unless they have a very specific skill set and know you personally. Generally, when people come up with this advice, it's because A, they use it to learn a language, and so they think that it's just you can just like copy paste to everybody else, which you can't. That's not how language learning works. Or the second reason why this is bad language learning advice is because they make money when you buy it. Either it's their product or they are an affiliate of that product, which means that if you buy it, they earn a percentage of the sale. So this is why you may be familiar with a lot of language apps that are very popular, but there's a lot of smaller ones that you don't know about because they don't have nearly the affiliate commission to pay people to talk about the apps and say, hey, buy this app so that I make money from it. This advice gets a lot of people stuck in language learning because they use a strategy or they use an app that doesn't actually work for their intentions, and so it's just an endless cycle of trying apps and them failing and then trying apps and then failing. And this is exactly why I don't make specific recommendations for language learning resources unless you are my client. But I do have another alternative for you if you are looking for some more personalized advice that isn't just a blanket give me money advice. If you're sick of the worst language learning advice, my recommendation is to use my free language app search, link below in the description, where you can type in your target language, your goal, and your current level, and you'll get a bunch of examples of different language learning apps, both big and small, that are there to support you in your language learning. Then when you click onto each of those language apps, you can read my blog post where I told you the pros and cons, what those language apps do, what those language apps don't do, screen recordings of me using the language app so you can make a real educated decision about which language resources you're using in your language learning so you stop wasting your time on language learning resources that don't work for you. So if you're ready to get off the hamster wheel of all this bad language learning advice without having to do the trial and error of figuring out which language learning advice is actually helpful and which isn't, start with my free language app search. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new one all about language learning. Bye.